like the network analysis. It's called critical path method, and it is abbreviated as CPM. It's one of the very important concepts in project management. So without a further ado, let's get started. And this is a typical example. So before we, define CPM and its associated factors or terminologies, let's take a look at the simple example. Probably, if you have been to Chennai, or if you have, if you've been physically present in our campus, and you probably know a place called Vandalur Zoo. It is Aringarenda Zoological Park. It is in Vandalur, so it's famously called Vandalur Zoo, right? So it is just like 12 kilometers or 10 to 12 kilometers from our institute, right? So if you take any bus from Mandalore Zoo to VIT, like if you wait in a bus stop, and if you happen to board any one of these bus, you probably take around 20 minutes to reach VIT Chennai, right? So if these buses, like these three buses, right? But if there are some bus like Super Deluxe where you can reach early, like the travel time will be very minimum. Whereas these buses will almost stop in almost all the bus stops in between the destination and the origin. So it takes 20 minutes. So which means that no matter what type of bus you board, if you want to travel from one place to another, like say you want to travel from Mandalore Zoo to VIT Chennai, it will take around 20 minutes or something. So in this case, what we need to try to emphasize is that time is deterministic, right? So we'll be looking into deterministic time. So which means that instead of this bus, you talk about the person. So you schedule an activity, start of an activity and end of an activity, or start event, end event, and this is an activity. So no matter what person you employ, the work happens around the same time, almost they're scheduled at same time. So that's what basically a critical path method, right? So it is an deterministic method, like the time duration is deterministic, and it was first developed by Morgan Walker and James E. Kelly Jr. Morgan from Engineering Service Division of DuPont, and James E. Kelly is from Remington Rand. And it was discovered, I mean, it was developed during 1957. So it's a very old technique, but it's still in use. One of the importance of CPM is that it's very simple and it's straightforward to use it. And it since it is a deterministic time, so it's have its own drawback also, because sometimes we cannot model activities just like that. Like we cannot form a duration like this. So there might be people who do it early, or some might do it late. So there's something like probabilistic associated with that. But CPM considers this to be deterministic. So there's another method called PERT, Program Evaluation Review Technique, by in which they look into the probabilistic thing. That will be probably will take it Monday's lecture. So as of now in CPM, time is deterministic. And first to do CPM, first we need to do work breakdown structure, which means that we will be listing down different activities to perform a project. Then we'll give time associated to that, and we will form a network diagram. So as simple as that. So the CPM is a very simple and straightforward technique. And then very important thing to be considered in CPM is that the time is deterministic duration. As I told you, it is fixed time. So there isn't anything related to probability or something like that. So the time is fixed. And this is very important to understand the least cost scheduling. Project crashing is a methodology we'll be considering at the end of module 4, where in which we look into least cost and optimum time. So the schedule can be constrained so that your cost is lesser, and so is the optimum time. You finish it in optimal time. So that's what basically least cost scheduling, right? And one of the important significance of CPM is that it determines the earliest completion time and not the probable completion. It will be giving you the exact deadline, not the probable completion time. Say for example, if your network says 35 days, and 35 day is your completion time. So it is not like what happens if you do it in 33, or what happens if you do it in 37 or something. It's no question of probability there. It is since it is a deterministic, so it gives exactly the earliest completion time, right? So that might be vary with the real time scenario as well, but it'll give you a firm date, not a probable date. But in the another method, we talked about program evaluation review technique, or PERT. We can get the probable day of completion. Say uh, we'll have some value, and we can find out like how early this can be done, or say if you have 35 days as a deadline, then you can even still look into like what will be the probability of completing that particular project in 30 days or something like that, or even 37 days or something. So depending upon the value you get, you can extrapolate or interpolate, or the reason you can provide a logical reasoning with the value. But here in CPM, you will get only the exact deadline, or exact earliest completion time. There are three important phases of critical path method. One is the network planning phase. Another is called network scheduling phase, and network control phase. Like for CPM, generally for an academic purpose, we will be looking into scheduling phase, where network planning phase is like if you take up a project, then you just plan particular activities, then you sequence that those activity based on the logical order. Then scheduling is adding time as a time factor to the planned or well planned stuff, or sequenced logic for the project. Like, so that's what basically scheduling means. And controlling means is actually the control phase, like how far you can control your scenarios. That's what basically means by control phase. That is actually the actual construction phase. Like once you plan, you can schedule, and the control is during execution, like how far you achieve the target or the scheduled work, or if there's any deviation, how do you report it to make sure that that goes within the stipulated time or the track. That is what basically called tracking, project tracking, right? So for this course, operation research, we'll be looking into network scheduling phase. For that, you need a prerequisite on network planning phase. Probably DA2 is based on network planning phase. I'll give you digital assignment 2 probably end of today. On this is on basically on CPM, right? So I'll tell you exactly what that means, and let's get started. Right. And there are uh, two things. One is called event times. Another is called activity times. As I told you, this bubble is the event, right? So this bubble is the event, right? So there are four event times for an activity. The reason is that there's a start event, there's an end event. Say, let's take a look at this particular notation or the syntax. I is the initial event and J is the end event for an activity. Sorry, I didn't mention for activity. And this is activity on arrow. So that's why we have mentioned activity above the arrow. And EI is the earliest event of activity I. So how early event I can occur, right? So I repeat, EI means how early event I can occur, and LI is how late an event can occur. In this case, how late an event I can occur. That is what we call LI. And similarly, we have EJ and LJ, when which how early event J can occur, or how late the event J can occur. So that's a basic syntax. Since it's a simple, single activity, there won't be much implications. Let's take a look at here. Like event 1 has no prerequisite or predecessor, so it will start exactly at 0th time. So which means it will start on the time. Like there won't be any delay because it does not have to wait for other events to complete to start this particular event. So event I starts instantaneously, and earliest event of I is 0. Then late event of I is also 0, because you can start early, or how you start early, or how late you start early, it will be on 0. It will not have any dependencies on previous event. So that is how we'll have got earliest event as well as late event of 1 or 0. Right. Now, how early event 2 can start? Here it is. How early events 2 can start is 0, 0 plus 5. So EI plus duration will give EJ. So EI plus duration will give EJ. So how early you can start is 5. 0 plus 5 is 5. So event 2 can start at the maximum of 5 units of duration. Right? So it could be days. Say if it is a day, it event 2 starts only after day 5 or at that completion of day 5. So that's what basically it means. Right? So this is a forward pass way. In a backward pass way, so this is an end event. So it does not have any event after this or no successor for event 2 or activity A. Say the last EI will become, last E value will become L value. So EJ equals to LJ. So we'll substitute 5 here. We'll substitute 5 here. I repeat, this since is the last activity or last event. So E of that particular event will become L, or earliest that event can start is 5, and earliest event, late event that can start is also 5. Or you can even call this earliest event occurrence time. Like it is not finish time. Don't think it's a start and finish. It is the occurrence time. How early the event 2 can occur, how late the event 2 can occur. So since it's the last activity, we will just substitute 5 directly here. 5. And to find out Li, it is Lj minus the duration, that's Li. Remember, since it has only single activity, we will not have much implications, but we will be explaining you with the project or a complete network diagram which has got varied entries and exits or something like that. Right. So 5 minus 5 is 0. So Lj minus the duration will become Li. So that is a backward pass computation. So I repeat, the forward pass computation, EI plus duration is EJ, whereas in a backward pass computation, Lj minus the duration will become Li. So that's how it becomes 0 and 0 and 5 and 5. Then we have got activity times. Activity times are 4 in numbers. One is the earliest start time or earliest activity start time is called EST, which will be here. So this is the earliest event occurrence time of I, late event occurrence time of I, then earliest start time, then activity, then duration, then earliest event time for J, or earliest event occurrence, late event occurrence time for J. So that's given here, right? So earliest time is the scheduled activity that can begin based on the preceding logic and constraint. Say how early the activity can start. So that is what we basically call EST. Then LST, how late the activity can start. So that will become here. So EST is above, LST is below. So this is the start activity durations in the left hand side corner, above and below. And another thing is called earliest finish time, EFT, in the right hand side, and latest finish time, LFT. This is the complete notation. Remember, this is the complete notation by which we have got event times, activity, 4 activity times, and 4 event times. And this is a complete thing. Right. In a forward pass computation, we will be finding out EI. EI plus the duration will give EJ. I repeat, EI plus the duration will give us EJ. This is the event time. And for activity time, in a forward pass, we'll be considering EST, early start time. Early start time plus the duration will give us early finish time. I repeat, early start time plus the duration will give us early finish time. So which means that in a forward pass construction, we'll find EI, EST, and EFT, and EJ, right? So in a backward pass construction, we'll find LJ. LJ minus the duration will give us LI. I repeat, Lj minus the duration will give us Li, right? And in a backward pass construction, we'll find out LFT, latest finish time. So LFT minus the duration will give us LST. So LFT minus the duration will give us LFT, right? So This is also typically the simple example that we considered early. So I think we can bypass this so that we can understand that much better. Right. So we'll come back to float little later. Yeah, right. So as I told you, in a forward pass construction, say this is a two activities network. Say it could be A and B or something like that. So the event times are I, J, and K. Right. I repeat, I, J, and K. Right. So to find out EST, early start time of this thing, that will be depending upon EJ, which is the earliest event of activity event J, or EFT of IJ. I repeat, so this thing EST of JK depends on EFT of previous activity or EJ, whichever is maximum in numerical value. So whichever is maximum in numerical value, that will be EST of JK, which means that earliest start of activity, this particular activity, depends on earliest finish of previous activity. Without the earliest finish, it cannot start, or the earliest event of previous start event of that particular activity, right? So unless uh, both are equal, it's fine. But if one is maximum, that maximum will be EST of JK, which means that this activity should start only after the event starts, or how early the previous event gets completed, or something like that, early finish time, right? And then once you find EST of this thing, you can find EFT, early finish time. So early finish time equals to early start time plus the duration, this particular duration. So EST plus JK is equals to EFT. So that's how you find out EST and EFT during a forward pass construction. Right. Say if you have and if you want to find EST of KL, so this is three activities when which two are emerging into this particular event. So EST of KL. So if you want to find EST of KL, you need to find out EFT of IK, I and K, then EFT of JK, J and K, then EK. So whichever is maximum, that will be the value of EST of KL. So EST of KL plus DKL will give us EFT of KL. So early start time will depends on early finish time of previous two activities that are emerging into this event, or EK, whichever is maximum, right? So among these three factors, whichever is maximum, that will be EST of KL. And once you find EST plus duration will give us early finish time. So this is a typical example of a forward pass. So that's what given here, like the maximum of EK, EFT of IK, and EFT of JK. And once you find EST of KL, EFT of KL can be determined by EST of KL plus TK. Yeah, right. So this is a forward pass computation, right? The next is the backward pass computation, right? So in the backward pass, as I told you, we'll be finding out LFT, right? Say in this case, if you want to find LFT of IJ, that will be depending on LST of the succeeding activity or LJ. So whichever is minimum, remember it is not maximum, it's the minimum, right? The latest start of the succeeding activity or the latest event of the end event. That is what basically LJ. LJ or LST, whichever is minimum, that will become LFT. So to find LST, it is LFT minus the duration will give us LST. So LST equals to LFT minus the duration, right? So you might be wondering, I just did EST of this thing. How can I find EST of this thing, right? So since there is no predecessor, so what is the EST of JK? It is EI or EFT of IJ. So whichever is maximum. Since there is no EFT of previous activity, so it will depend on EI value only. So EST will becomes EI value, right? So default will be EI value. There's no comparison of maximum of that, right? So that's what basically is given here. Then once you find EST of IJ, EST of IJ plus DIJ will give us EFT of IJ. That's how it is. And finally, even you can take a look at if you want to find EST of IK, it is just EI. And here EST of JK, it is just EJ. And EST of IJ, no, IK plus DIK will give us EFT of IK, whereas EST of JK will be EST of JK will be on I mean EJ. Then EST of JK plus DJK will becomes EFT of JK, and as simple as that. And that is how you find the value here, here, and EK, which is maximum, that will become EST of KR. Right. And same way in a backward pass, if you want to find this thing, as I told you, it will be based on LST of JK and LJ. But if you want to find LFT of JK, LFT of JK itself, then it is just LK, because there's no succeeding activity. So whatever the value of LK, that will be LFT of JK, right? As simple as that. And once you find LFT, you can find LST by subtracting the duration with LFT. LFT JK minus DJK will give us LST JK. So this is our backward pass. Right. Same way, if you have 3 arrows, remember in a forward pass, we'll be looking into the arrows that are emerging or penetrating this particular event or incidenting that particular event. Whereas in a backward pass, we'll be looking into arrows or activities that are leaving from an event. Like for example, LFT of IJ will depends on LJ or LST of JK or LST of JL. So whichever is minimum, that will become LFT of IJ. Right. So once you find out LFT of IJ, LFT IJ minus DIJ will give us LST of IJ. So I have given here LJ, LST JK, LST JL. JL, whichever is minimum, that will become LFT of IJ. Then once you find LFT minus the duration, DIJ will give us LST, latest start time. So that is how you complete the network diagram, right? Say that are the I repeat, there are 4 event times and 2 event times per event. Start event have 2 event and end event have 2 events. Earliest event occurrence time or latest event occurrence time. Whereas activity times are 4. One is early start time, and early start time plus duration will give us early finish time. And the next is the late start time and late finish time. Late finish time minus the duration will give us late start time. So as simple as that. And then we talked about float. Float is a very important factors to be considered in critical path method or network analysis in general. The reason is that float is the buffer time, like the stringent time. So we talked about this example when which we talked about all buses will take 20 minutes. Sometimes if this bus takes 17 minutes, it's good, right? So you have 3 minutes buffer. So your planned duration is 20 minutes, whereas you complete before that, and you whatever the time, the difference, that is your buffer time or your time that you achieve extra, or the time you get the benefits, probably a 3 minutes or 4 minutes you get extra in comparison with the 20 minutes travel. That is called positive float, or in terms of buffer time, right? So those are good because sometimes if you get delay in other activity, say you board all this thing at same time in the bus stop. Say what happens if you come to bus stop little late. So if you happen to take any one bus, then if it reaches the destination ahead of 20 minutes, then the time you spend in the bus stop or waiting time, or the time you reach the bus stop, the delay time can be compensated. So that's what we call a positive float. So you finish work early so that some time is really there. Like, so that is what we call lead, L-E-A-D, lead time, right? So you finish it early. The opposite of that is lag time. So which means that instead of 20 minutes, if it takes 23 minutes. So the 3 minutes is the negative float, or it is not buffer, it is a lag time. So it's a delay time. So that is what basically it means by negative float. So those things are called float, which is positive or negative. Generally, we'll be looking into positive floats. That is what called built-in contingency. And it is also known as slack time, SLACK. So when you read some literature on project network diagram, do not get intimidated by the term called slack, because both represents the same. It is a float or slack in the project network diagram. Either is a string, right? The first is the start float, which is the latest start minus the earliest start. Like this is the difference between latest start time and earliest start time. It's the absolute difference between latest start and early start. So you have buffer during start time, or the next is latest finish time minus early finish time. So that is also a float. That's a finish float. Latest finish minus early finish. Like in the beginning, if there is any delay or is there any contingency or built-in contingency, or in the finish time, like EFT, among difference between EFT and LFT. So this is a typical float time, and there are four types of float times. One is called total float, T suffix T, which is the start float and end float, absolute difference between the start float and end float, LST minus EST, LFT minus EFT. And it can also define that by event times. Like this is an activity times, and event time is that LJ minus EI, LJ minus EI minus the duration. I repeat, LJ, which is the end event time, minus EI, earliest event time, minus the duration, or LJ minus duration minus EI. So as simple as that. LJ minus duration minus EI, that will become the float time. So what's the difference between the event occurrence, so that you can see if there's any value, then that's a contingent buffer, right? And the next is called free float. Free float can be defined by EJ minus EI, EJ minus EI minus duration. Like the total float is LJ minus EI minus duration, whereas free float is that EJ minus duration minus EI, or EJ minus EI minus duration. As called free float. This represents the amount of time by which a start of an activity may be delayed without delaying the start of the following activity. So that particular activity, how far it's getting delayed. So that's what we call it, free float. Then there are two things. One is called independent float and interfering float. And the formula is that EJ minus LI. It is not EI or something like that. So it is EJ minus LI minus the duration. EJ minus Li minus duration. So that is independent float, and interfering float is that total float minus free float. So total float minus free float is interfering float, or you can take EJ minus EI minus duration. No, this is the first one. LJ minus EI minus duration minus EJ minus EI minus DIJ. So minus of this EJ plus EI plus DJ. So that will become the interfering float. So it's a difference. It's a typical difference between free float and total float. As simple as that. So these are the four different float times. In the next class, we'll be taking a look at a problem by which we can use the logic. We talked about event times and activity times. Then we'll solve the network diagram using critical path method, right? So I think we have come to the end of this lecture.